you? Keep it down in there. Well, we should be live, so welcome to Flapping Fish Podcast 007. You are 007. And this is Brian Houston, all the way from Northern Ireland. There he is. So, and this is live from the lockdown, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So welcome, Brian.
Thanks very much for having me.
I would say top of the morning to you, but you know.
And no one ever actually says that here.
No.
Nor do we eat Lucky Charms for breakfast, which really disappoints Americans when they find that out.
Shame. Just, you do drink Guinness though.
Like fish.
Amongst other beverages.
And
other
whiskey.
beverages are available.
We like the whiskey.
Yeah. You do, don't you?
Do you like this little lap stay here? I put this here just for you.
I noticed that, yeah. She's a beaut. What is she?
Well, it's a Rickenbacker.
Great.
But it's spelt with an H. So apparently that means it was made before Rickenbacker. Apparently it was made before 1930 or 49, that means. Between 34 and 49.
That's great.
Little case and all.
Yeah, so beautiful, aren't they?
Yeah, gorgeous. So I'm just trying to learn it. Hence why I've been asking you about strings and tunings and everything.
Yeah.
But I kind of sound like a child on a violin at the minute with it.
It sounds like a violin. It's not supposed to sound like a violin.
No, I sound like a child trying to play a violin.
Oh, sorry. I'm distracted. That would be interesting. Get a bow on it.
I've actually tried an e-bow on it, which was interesting. You get a nice rumble out of that.
Yeah, that would work. Anything works. There's no rules, really, I think.
Well, this came in open E tuning.
Okay.
And I thought that was a sign, since when I lead worship, I usually stay in E for the entire time.
Yeah.
In fact, I did so much worship and played in the key of E for so long, I actually developed a repetitive strain injury in my hand. Had to get acupuncture and all. My hand was like that for 4 years.
E for you
from now on. 4 years in the key of E, yeah. So how are you handling lockdown, as they say over
here? Yeah, all right. I think the initial adrenaline has worn off, and it's getting a little tougher, I think, for me. What about you?
I think, yeah, probably about 2.5 weeks ago, it suddenly stopped being funny. I think the first couple of weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, was like, well, the first week, I remember pulling my stuff out of the studio, and I was wrestling with myself because I was thinking, is this even necessary? You know, this all just seems to be, you know, in the absence of any tangible evidence that I could see close hand, I was thinking, what's the point? I mean, I'm pulling all this stuff out of here. We could be back in here in 2 weeks from now, and I have to take it all down 7 flights of stairs, and I wasn't really relishing bringing it all back. And then I came here, I started to do online busking, and that was okay. And then I began to do a lot of work mixing and stuff, and I realized, yeah, it was worth bringing all the stuff home, because Belfast is a ghost town, and I wouldn't have fancied going in there every day, up those 7 flights, and sitting in a room by myself. You know, that would have been depressing. So
yeah.
But then about 2.5 weeks ago, it suddenly started to get a bit depressing here. Because there's a lot of people who are thriving on the doom and gloom. You know, there's a lot of people who seem to get real enjoyment out of making it sound like, oh, the world is at an end, we'll never be the same again, you know.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to succumb to that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's strange. We've had a mixture of feeling of real excitement, I guess mainly when we've been praying, like this feeling of like something's happening, not beyond, not that we're rejoicing in the virus or anything like that, but just a sense of something going on. And then other moments where you just, I guess it will come under the category of mental health, where you're just not good and snappy at home and all that kind of normal stuff.
The kids are driving you nuts?
Well, they're pretty good, our ones. I don't know. We're probably it's probably more, sometimes can be my own worst enemy,
Right.
But doing all right. Hey man, I wanted to, this is kind of weird because in another way, this sort of thing of doing this podcast has come to life again. So I started it a few years ago, did about 4 of them, and just the sheer workload of getting people in the same room, filming, editing, all that sort of thing, it just sort of fell on its bum really. And now all of a sudden it feels like it's come back. But the cool thing about having you on here is that it's called the Flapping Fish podcast because of you. And an amazing an amazing message that you sent me. So for those, I wanted to just quickly tell the story because it is a really cool one for me, and it was made a really big impact on me. So is that all right if I just
go
for it?
Go ahead.
So I think about 8 or 9 years ago, we went over to Northern Ireland and we did a weekend of kind of leading worship, but taking a band over, doing stuff. And it was kind of a strange thing. We were all at a bit of a loose end. And so we just tried some stuff. And Northern Ireland was awesome. But one of the highlights was doing a worship basement in the basement of a church. And I think you were there and you had cheese and wine cracking open. And we just had a great time of worship. But we talked about it afterwards as a band, and we were really impacted by you, Brian. And what really impacted us was you just served us. Like you gave us your nice guitars to play, you set up the PA, you did all, you were just running around just doing all this stuff.
It's getting hot in here.
And then what was really cool was you were mixing from the side of the stage, I think, but you were just there worshiping, and you had your hands in the air, and then you were on your knees, and but afterwards we talked about it, and we were like, this is a great dude, because he, you've got your own stuff going on, you've got your own music, and you've been around, you've been all over the place, and you just weren't about, you could have been the one up there doing it all, but you were quite happy just in the background serving. And we talked about you afterwards. So long story short, I sent you a message saying thanks, that was really cool of you, and you modeled something awesome and godly and all that. But I was sort of pouring my heart out a bit in a message saying, I sometimes feel really uncomfortable in church, and I don't quite know where my music fits and where I fit, and blah blah blah, existential crisis going on. And you sent me this message. I'm just going to read it out because there's probably, whether they're watching now or they'll watch later, a couple of people who will relate to this. You said this. Hi Mark, welcome to the tribe of the flapping fish. I think as I'd said, I felt like a fish out of water.
Right.
You said, I know how you feel. And then you said amazing things to me. Your heart and your gift go way beyond where the church is comfortable, but it's a precious thing you carry. I think God uses the mainstream industry to hone his kids into mighty minstrels who play with all the fire and passion they possess. You carry something special that the church would tame and the world would crush, but the Lord will preserve. In the tension between day and night, there is a place called the dawn. This is where you reside, between the thing that is dying and the thing being born. This is where you reside. You may feel alone, but you are a part of a tribe that roams the earth, worshipping the Most High and singing his virtues. You are a true Levite, a bluesman, a shaman, a magician, and an inspiring man. Hold on to your dream. It was put there by God. Love, B.
That was Bono. I think it's from Bono.
Yeah, Bono wrote that.
That's
What an amazing thing to write to me, you know.
Thank you. It does sound very anointed when you read it back like that. It is. It's amazing. It's amazing how much God like uses us, like almost, you know, like to speak to people. Like it's humbling that He used me in that circumstance to encourage you and call out the God in you. You know. So I'm amazed you've kept it. Actually, that's class. Thank you. Very grateful.
Yeah, it came at a really we're getting some amazing comments coming through. Do you know who Terry Butler is? He's a classic Vineyard songwriter. He's on here. He says, "Yeesh, Brian, make me cry. Why don't you?" Yeah. It all touches me more because it's with a beautiful English accent. Well, it wasn't written in English. it was interpreted.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
That's so the idea with this was just to reach out really to people who are, you know, swimming in both worlds really. And I think, I know a lot of amazing musicians who are just incredible, and you are one of them. And what obviously at the moment it's a bit different, you're in lockdown, but what are just for those who don't know you, what is your life like? What's your music? Where does your music go? Where do you fit? How do you do it?
Well, the short answer to the where do you fit is I don't think I fit. I think like you, like many musicians, it doesn't matter whether you're in the church or whether you're in the world or both. You don't fit either anyway, because part of being an artist almost comes from a place that you started out not fitting before you had figured out a way to express that through art. I think sometimes art is an actual reaction to that rejection, if you like, that isolation that many creative people feel. Where do I express myself? I guess I find myself in this weird place because whenever I swing hugely into the church, and like I love worship and I passionately believe in it, and I gorge myself on it because it's such a massively open, creative, almost like this broad vista of go anywhereness. That to me is what worship is. And I know that for many people that's not their experience, but I get excited about worship because I actually believe there is, as the pastor of our church used to say, the answer is yes unless God says no. I mean, that was the environment that we were raised in, and as worshippers. And
what
so
church? What church
that was
that?
CFC Belfast, but that was Paul Reid. Paul's not the pastor there anymore. He's kind of like does an itinerant thing now. He's still involved as an emeritus, but his influence isn't as keenly felt as what it would have been when he was like hands on. Mm-hmm. And like to have a pastor and that's his attitude is remarkable. And don't get me wrong, like if you went beyond the line, and the line was never, it was never creative. It was never like, oh no, you can't do that. Like I remember asking him once, could I rent lights and a smoke machine for Sunday morning? And he texts back, of course. And I wasn't actually able to organize it, so it didn't happen. But the fact that he was willing to say yes, and they would have paid for that, like they would have covered me in that. And I was very much just one of the worship team. It wasn't like I was a worship authority or leader in any way. I was just a member of the team like everybody else. And so there's no special privileges granted to me, is what I'm saying. That was just his attitude to the team. And the reason I wanted to do that was because I'd actually heard a David Roos talk on heaven and God. He did this incredible talk describing heaven and all the elders singing and the choirs and the flames, and then God holds a mirror up to the whole thing and multiplies it by 2. And I wanted to try to replicate that in worship on a Sunday morning. I think the thing that we ended up doing was beating on a load of drums and the place went crazy. But the point is, Paul, crazy in a good way, Paul was totally up for that. And strangely enough, within the mainstream world, or the secular world, as people call it, I think that's much more restrictive. There's much more streamlining going on there. And I know if you want to work in the Christian industry, there's a lot of streamlining, but we can talk about that in a minute. But to fit in the mainstream world, you've got to sort of target yourself and, cut your music to fit certain things so they can get on BBC radio or get on any kind of playlist and to fit into a genre. And so I find secular music, whilst it gives me more creativity or more breadth in terms of my personal lyrics, my expression gives me much more subject matter. It also narrows the musical expression because it has to fit a certain style. So I move from one to the other. When I get really fed up, cheesed off, or rebellious, or angry, or rejected, or frustrated, or any of these emotions with the church, it doesn't happen as much now as what it used to, because it used to happen week about. Used to happen morning and afternoon. Today I love it. Tomorrow I don't. And so if I do get to that place where I'm fed up with the church, I'll just go off and write a secular record. And I guess my journey shows my healing in some ways, because in the early days when I started out, everything was secular. I'd done 4 secular albums before I made a worship album. And then I did 2 or 3 more secular albums and made another worship. But in recent times, it's been worship, one secular, worship. And it's been a long time since I did a secular record. And I actually thought at one point I'd forgotten how to write those kinds of songs because I was so focused on worship. In that sense, my journey has been the wrong way around, because apparently the journey that many worship artists in Nashville and places like that, they seem to think the trajectory is, I'll become a Christian star, and when I get big enough, I'll cross over to the mainstream and then really make the big money. My journey's been the other way around. It's been like, I started off in the secular. I made my living completely for that and served the church for free, and then crossed over completely into ministry and into a ministry heart rather than a kind of make a living from it. I mean, the journey it's a faith journey. I live in faith. We trust the Lord and He provides. And I've changed. I've only realized recently I'm not so much a businessman as how I used to think of myself. I'm actually a minister of the gospel and of worship who just happens to have an expression in both places. A very long answer, I'm sorry, but that's kind of it.
That's a cool answer. And while you were talking, we had my buddy Henry join us.
Okay.
But then he came and he left. So
right. Yeah, I seen another window opening up there. I was wondering about that.
Yeah. So if he makes it back, we'll welcome him because he's good value.
Okay.
Yes. There's another comment here which you should probably hear, and it's from Roger Littleover. I gave my life to Jesus after being impacted by Brian singing "Your Whisper to My Soul. I play and sing it still."
Wow.
Amazing, eh?
Yeah. You're going to have one here soon.
Yeah.
This is like coming on surprise.
It's so when I became I became a Christian about 19, and it was like career suicide to do Christian music. Not that I had much of a career anyway, but I had some promise. I didn't have a career. But what was your journey to becoming a Christian? Did you grow up in a Christian home, or why are you a Christian now? How did you get there?
No, I wasn't raised in a Christian home. My mom was a Protestant in the political sense, but not in a religious sense. My dad was a communist, very anti-church, anti-God, anti-religion, anti-anything to do with that. Anti the Orange Order, anti the Masonic Lodge. Came home many nights with a black eye or bleeding face from talking when he should have been listening. And so an act of rebellion in my house would have been to go to church. But where I grew up, there was one end of my street, Ravenswood Park in the Braniel Estate, where I live about 3 miles from there now, maybe not even that far, maybe a mile. One end of the street was a primary school with a big concrete playing ground, and the other end of the street was a church. And at one end, they trained people how to be paramilitaries. It was like military training. You learned to march. You got involved in terrorism by going to the school on a Tuesday night. And I asked my mom, could I go and join up? And she slapped me and said, don't be daft. So I ended up going to the church because it was somewhere warm on a winter night, and there was girls and there was music and there was free cups of tea. And sometimes they'd have a band come in from England. There's a band called the Advocates, when I was about 10 or 12. And they'd come all the way from England just to play music in Ireland. And for us in Ireland growing up, something from England was like from outer space, because it just was very exotic. And then I just went along there because there was nowhere else to go, and because I fancied some of the girls in the church. And eventually the message,
some of them
what?
some of them not just one.
Yeah. But and that's actually where I met my girlfriend, who became my wife, who's still my wife now. But so then, it was the leaders. The leaders just loved us, bro. Like they loaned us amps and mics. They taught us chords. They taught us little runs, these guys all liked 60s music because that was the music of their childhood. And so they were teaching us like Wild Thing by Jimi Hendrix and all these kinds of things, and letting us plug into amps that had valves and tubes. And whenever we asked, could we build a store to store our gear, they said yes. And we got the timber and we built the wall. And of course, we put a window in it so there could be a studio and everything. And if we got a little gig, they would run us to the gigs, and they, in their personal cars, and they just showed us the love of God and acceptance all the time. And in a position where it was a choice between learning how to kill somebody or blow somebody up, going out with leaders who would bring you home and make sure you were okay and didn't want any money. They would let us take the money if we got paid for a gig. There was nights we even nearly got killed by the British Army. We were driving through Belfast, and the driver had the music up loud, and he didn't hear the army screaming halt, and he drove through a roadblock, and we looked, me and my girlfriend, my wife, we were out looking out the windows, and the soldiers were all taking aim and falling on the ground and getting ready to engage, and thankfully he stopped just before they opened fire. So it was a very hairy time, and in the middle of all that, I made many, many decisions to become a Christian almost every week. Because because it was that kind of gospel, you know. It was like, just as I am, just as I was last week, and just as I was the week before that. And there's a crusade by a guy called Barry White in a big tent, and I think it was there that I gave my life to Jesus in a way that was more long lasting. And then when we formed a little gospel group, the leader of the group, the bass player, he came to me and he said, listen, this is for real. We're not going to be messing around here. You need to get right with God. And in some ways, he was the first pastoral figure that I ever had, and was calling me to account, you know, to not just be like, not just treat Christianity as if it was something you can dip in and out of. We had to take it serious because now we were going out to represent it. So it was a gradual growth into maturity and into taking my faith seriously, you know. Made many mistakes along the way.
Of course, yeah. It's amazing when you find that sort of sense that, wow, we're on a mission. That sense, there is a responsibility that comes with it. I think, and when you're young, there's an intensity, isn't there, that can come, and I think it is a good thing. It's not always good, but it does kept us probably out of a lot of trouble.
Yeah,
you know, having that comradeship or camaraderie and accountability, you know.
Yeah, well, in our case, it was literally, could have been the difference between life and death, you know, or jail, and, you know, ruining your life by getting involved in something really quite serious. And the church protected us from that, and they did it by love. They didn't do it by rules. Those leaders served us again and again and again. If I meet them today, I still meet some of those youth leaders, and they are the most loving, caring people. They still have a heart for me. They still see me as that 16-year-old kid, and they're amazing. And they're so proud of me. Do you know what I mean? And that's what we grew up with, people who loved us. But I think
that's really encouraging, man. It's encouraging for me because I'm one of the things I do is youth pastor, you know. So I've got those kids who come and bang drums and, you know, play table tennis and drink coffee and eat sweets. You know? It's great. It's great, but it's the same feeling, you know. It's like, you really do love people. Do you know what I mean? You really do. Like, Christ comes into your life, it really does mess you up, doesn't it? And you start. But I think people know that, like kids know that. If he's still watching, we've got one of them watching at the moment, Robert. He's great lad as well. He's on. So yeah, cool. And so what do you?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, if you got something else to say, that's cool. It's interesting.
I mean, it wasn't like we did encounter like other expressions of church that were much more controlling. Once we got married, we went to a different church, which was. It was the mid-'80s, and it was heavy shepherding, and there was a lot of stuff went on there that maybe could have been handled better. And I was asked to set down music by the pastor of that church, and there was a guy. That church was called. Well, we'll not give the name, just protect the innocent. And but anyway, this church. It was almost all artists at this church. Of one expression or another. There were people who molded clay, and there was people who painted paintings, there was people who did abstract stuff, and there were many bands and musicians, and in an effort to try to control us, many of us were told to set it down, and I did, and I sold everything I had. I sold all my effects pedals, which now on eBay they're worth a fortune, and I sold amps and everything, and there was another guy who was in a band at the same church, and he's now the head. Well, he was the head of Integrity Music's A&R. He didn't quit the music. He moved to England, went to Milton Keynes, and did his thing over in England. And whereas I was a good little boy, I set everything down, didn't do music for 3 years. But then when I came out of that, and I just had a regular job like everybody else. You know, I was a carpenter, and then I was a production planner, then I was a production manager, then I was an operations manager, and I was on the route to becoming a director. I thought I could be a director of a company by the time I was 30, and then the company shut down and I was out of a job, and that's when I started to do sound for bands at night and play music and write songs and try and get a record deal and that whole thing. And to me, worship music wasn't a thing at all. I'd produced a couple of albums for people like Trish Morgan, Robin Mark. I'd sung on many Ian White albums, and played guitar on a couple. And I thought worship music was a joke. And anything I heard was choral and uncool. Ian White was the coolest thing there was in the late 80s. And he was great. And he wrote great songs. He looked great. He played great guitar. He was as close to rock and roll as there was. And but everything else that I heard was, to me, second rate. And then in '93, Kevin Prosh came to Belfast, and I blagged my way in as a guitar player. I just showed up with a guitar, and I heard him and his manager talking, overheard them talking, and I heard somebody say, "What's he doing here?" And the other guy said, "Well, he's the local worship guitar player," which I wasn't really. I'd kind of just heard it was a good gig, and I came down with my Telecaster, and then said, "Well, just let him stay. We can't really ask him to go home." So out of sheer pity, they let me stay. And Kevin could have bought and sold me on guitar. Like, he didn't need me, but they were just kind. They didn't tell me to go home. And and that 3 nights playing guitar with him changed my life. And it was a God thing that they didn't tell me to go home, because I had never knew that music had the power to connect with heaven until I played with Kevin Prosh. And every single night I played with him, I just wept. I'd never in my life had music impact me like that. I'd done money gigs and volunteer gigs and weddings and rock gigs and tried to get record deals. I'd done all those things, played big shows and opened for people who were important and stuff. And all of a sudden there was an element to music which was transcendent, and that year, '93, and many people have never heard of Kevin Prosh, but in '93, Kevin Prosh imparted that to me. His sound guy on his English tour, he said to him, "God says you're the radio guy." And his sound engineer was Martin Smith, who was in a band called Delirious. I'm told he stayed with a family in England and prophesied over their 14-year-old son that he would write songs that would go around the world. And the guy was just learning the guitar at that point. And that guy was Matt Redman. And that was Kevin Prosh. To me, Kevin Prosh was the Elvis of worship. It is the Elvis of worship. And he completely transformed people's lives through his ministry. And what I do it's funny, I was leading worship on Sunday, and I've got lots of toys and gadgets these days, kind of like Kevin. And to kind of get myself in the zone, I was setting up Saturday and practicing, and then Sunday morning doing the thing. To get myself in the zone, I was listening to Kevin on Spotify, and I realized that everything I'm doing now, he was doing 20 years ago. He's so far ahead of his time. And he did an album with Heidi Baker in 2013 called The Gift. And if you want an example of the least commercial, least successful, most groundbreaking, inspiring, crazy worship, that is the epitome of worship music, because it's Kevin and Heidi Baker. Imagine that combination.
And she's just laughing, really, isn't she? Most of
laughing and screaming and weeping, all that's going on. Yeah.
There's a song on there. It's not actually written by Kevin Prosh, and it's called. It starts, "Humbled again, I can't deny the weakness I feel in my soul. I praise you, God, Not in my strength, but in my weakness.
Yeah.
Just when I heard that, same thing. I think my friend Simon McCrossan gave me the CD, and I hadn't listened to it, and I sat in my car, and I was actually on my way to my first counselling session. I was in a bit of a state, and I stuck this CD in, and I just bawled driving along to this counselling session. But yeah, that Black Peppercorns album, but even his worship songs. I mean, that was when I became a Christian. It was '94, and they were singing "Show Your Power" everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Toronto Blessing. You know, the Holy Spirit was powerfully being poured out. People, you know, it was mental, and that was I wouldn't really have stayed in church if it hadn't been for the presence of God like that, and me going. I've been to churches where nothing was really happening. You know, I went and just didn't like it, and then it was kind of like still weird here, but that thing like you're talking about, connecting with heaven and heaven sort of coming into the room. Yeah, it's such a precious time, those mid-90s. Yeah, and yeah, Kevin Prosh sort of still sort of has this huge influence, really. Not like you say, not massively famous, but definitely in the UK, just changed things forever, really. So praise the Lord and bless him wherever he is.
And let me tell you, not only was Kevin, like, I still have cassettes. I bought a cassette player just to play them. I have a teaching set from Kevin in the early 90s, where he's discussing subjects that have, it's almost like the buried scriptures that the Judeans lost. Like, there's teaching that he's giving out that is just not taught anywhere. We've lost it, but he was on the cutting edge of all of that. But he fathered me into worship. He showed the way creativity wise. He showed the way in terms of passion, in terms of crossing the borders and the boundaries out of the church into the world. He did all of that. And then in 1998, when my mainstream career was at almost its height, when I was on the radio like crazy, and I was on the TV, and I was in the newspapers, and you know, the guy tipped to be a huge success here in Ireland and all this here in the north of Ireland, I was asked to open for Kevin Prosh, and I went down, and of course he's a worship leader, but all I have at that point is all my little mainstream kind of country folk songs. So I get up and I do a half an hour opening slot of all my little tunes. And I was, you know, local boy, greeted really well by the crowd. It's in a place called the Elmwood Hall. And then Kevin came out and the place went ballistic. And I'm sitting up in the balcony with Rob and Mark, my wife Pauline, Robin and Jackie Mark. And we're just watching the place go crazy, you know, people down below all just dancing and celebrating. And the night just went like this. It just kept going up. And then when he was done and they were all screaming for more, it was a long pause. And then he came out again and he said, okay, I'll do one more, but only if Brian Houston does one more. And Rob and Mark's looking at me and I'm looking at him. We're going, I've never seen anything like this. You know, most main artists, what they do with, especially if the opening act is good. Like I've had people who are very well known, famous people, hear me sound check and force me to move to the side of the stage and stand in the dark to try to sabotage my set, because they backstage through speakers they heard me sound checking. I've had people try to nobble me, right? And this guy came out and he says this, I'll do one more if Brian Houston does one more. And then he could have played anything. He could have done Your Banner Over Me. He could have done Show Your Power. He could have done anything. I mean, if he'd have played someone else's song and been up tempo, I could not have followed him. He could have wrecked me and made me look like an idiot and crushed the whole evening. But he starts playing the most mournful, depressing, downbeat song you've ever heard. And he took the energy of the crowd from this ecstatic expression all the way down to this massively introspective, very, what we say, dour. I think you say dour over there, but this really dour song. And then he said, "Welcome, Brian Houston." And I had to walk up through the crowd, and everybody's slapping me in the back and everything. And he left the stage, and his band left the stage. And so I had to use all his gear. It was like Saul's armor, like the strap was too long on the guitar, and the monitors didn't sound the way I liked them. To me, they sounded super muddy, and it just was awful. But so I thought, what will I do? So I started doing Amazing Grace with a kind of country groove, like a shuffle thing. And I started to do it with my eyes closed. I was so terrified. I remember trembling. And I've got verse done, and I'm going into the second verse, and I start hearing noises, and I open my eyes, and there's Martin Neal setting up, with pulling out his drumsticks, and the bass player's pulling out his bass. And next thing I hear someone plugging guitar in behind me. I look around, there's Kevin plugging in Fender guitar, and I'm just like looking at these guys, and they start rocking out on this. They all just join in the next verse, and next thing Kevin takes a solo and then sings harmony on the last verse. The place goes crazy, and I look like, it's emotional for me now, but I literally looked like I'd slept with a coat hanger in my mouth. Like I was just like, I couldn't stop smiling. And that guy, talk about fathering someone, talk about preferring someone, talk about building a platform for someone. I mean, it was 3 or 4 months after that, he was done. Nobody wanted to know him. And yet I've never since seen anybody father a person the way he did that night. And he invited me to meet him the next day, and I spent about 4 hours with him. And he started to explain to me all the songs, but the first song on Tumbling Ground that starts with "Please Don't Leave." You know that song? That's about his depression after an incredible night of worship. That's about when he's considering suicide because he can't cope with the loneliness. And he started to tell me all the stories. And I got to see the other side of Kevin. And it was a huge honor. And I'll never forget him. And I'll never stop telling people about him.
It kind of explains you setting up your PA, lending us all your gear, doesn't it?
It's a wee small thing though compared to what he did for me,
But it's an attitude, and you get that attitude should go with you into any circumstance, right? Any, you don't have to agree to do this today. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing really in it for you, but it's
getting to chat to you.
Getting to talk about Kevin Prosh. Yeah.
Getting to talk about how good God is.
Yeah, I had some. Yeah. It is an amazing thing. Like, well, I think that thing of like, what can happen. So probably the guy who was the biggest influence on me early on was Graham Ord, who also, I think, he wrote. You'll know his song, "The Lord is Gracious and Compassionate."
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so he was my youth leader and worship leader. And so I think he was also one of Kevin's guitarists, but there's a song, "Well, I saw her bending low down by the water," was written for Graham's wife.
Wow.
When they went through, pretty difficult, lost a child and stuff. So I sort of was around that stuff, but not directly. I think I met Kevin Prosh once, but I was introduced to him very briefly, but never had the opportunity yet to hang out with him. Someone I'd love to meet and do some music with one day.
Yeah.
But that thing of like, Graham, I think, is also a flapping fish. You know, he would be like out in the pub on a Saturday night playing slide guitar through a Fender Twin and a Fender Bandmaster. No, no Bandmaster, Bassman.
All right. Okay.
A blonde Fender Bassman. Amazing amp. And just so you'd be there on a Saturday night, and then on Sunday morning, it would spill over into the church, you know, and then, but also what we did in the church would, as far as the presence of God and worship, would spill out into the pubs. And that's always the thing for us. It's like you got one foot, you know, God is, I really learn about that stuff, about what can happen when sort of heaven starts to join in with what you're doing, or you're joining in with them, or who knows quite what's going on. And even now, like if I've been doing covers gig or restaurant gigs, that kind of stuff, just working extra work, you know, just doing it for the money. But it's not for the money. It's like sometimes I'll just go off onto spontaneous things. It's often around the spontaneous, isn't it, that those amazing things happen in a room. And it's like half of you's thinking, these guys aren't going to get this. You know, I'm just doing that, hanging on a chord and singing stuff out like I would in church. And often that's the thing that people go, oh, that was really cool. What, you know, what was that thing that you were doing? Or sometimes they'll know you're a Christian and stuff like that, even though you haven't said anything, you know.
Yeah, because the music spoke.
Yeah.
But see, that's, I mean, St. Francis of Assisi, go and preach the gospel, and if you have to, use words. And in that way, you have, you've preached the gospel through your guitar and through your spirit-filled moment. And it resonates in the hearts of those who are called of God. And it's like, sometimes I think that musicians like yourself are, because you can see, there was a time, and there still is a place in the world where the church is completely retreated and created its own subculture and put up fantastic music and fantastic movies and created a safe place in the name of protecting their children, and completely retreated from the world and lived their generation after generation, living their entire life within the context of Christian subculture. That still exists, but that's not where you are. And I'm not even sure what that is. I mean, I understand it within a cultural context and why it's grown up and how that meets the safety needs of certain people. But Jesus said, go into all the world and make disciples. He didn't say build yourself a cocoon where you're all disciples, you know. So for you to cross over and to take the gospel through your guitar or your lap steel into that place is to fulfill the call. And that guy Graham Ward, who I've never heard of him, you know, but he's famous in heaven for doing what he did. And,
he's actually watching now.
Is he really? Well,
yeah, he's changing it. Loving the convo, guys. Two of my heroes, chin wagging. Nice.
Is there someone else here? Is there someone else on? I mean, that thing, that taking it where it's meant to be, as you say, it hones your craft, because you can't be bad because someone will tell you you're bad.
Yeah.
Like I remember walking out on stage to open for Elvis Costello, and I'd done a couple of tunes. It was in the Point Theatre Point Depot in Dublin, 10,000 seater, and someone shouted out from the crowd, "Get off your crap." They don't do that in church. In church, they stop speaking to you. Almost the worst thing you can hear in a church is "he's got a good heart," which is code for "he's crap." So I think you really have something, and when and Graham really has something when you can go into that place, and that place, then when you bring it to the church, and that cross pollination, that it's like iron sharpening iron, and one is sharpening the other, and it's keeping it from growing stale, and it's keeping it from becoming Christian subculture. And Jonathan and his armor bearer, let's go up and see if God has delivered them into our hands. And if they say, come up here, we know God has given us them. And if they say, wait while we come down, we'll know to get out of here. And they shout down, come on up. And he says to his armor bearer, it's the Philistine camp up there, right? They're about to climb up a cliff with their armor and their shields and swords and then attack these guys. And they make their way up the cliff and they start fighting the Philistines. And it says as they ran through the camp, slaughtering Philistines, Hebrews who had gone over to the Philistine side came out and joined with Jonathan and his armor bearer and turned against the Philistines. And in that way, when you're in a bar, when you're doing a wedding, when you're in any place where you're engaging with those who are outside the four walls of a church, there is this thing that as you slay the enemy, even when you play a note that brings heaven to earth, there's hearts in that place that are going, there's God's in the room. And I need to leave the enemy's camp and I need to join God again. I need to get myself right with God. There's a witness in that. And it happened to me. I remember Austin, Texas, South by Southwest, 2008. And I'd quit the Christian industry in 2003. I didn't do it well. I didn't handle it well. I was very bolshy, very hurt, very angry. My wife got cancer in 2004. So out of all of those things, I just threw myself into the mainstream world, into the secular world. I decided I was never going to play churches again. And I would never do worship again. That's what I decided in 2003. And it was all made because of hurt. And I was in a bar in Austin, Texas, and this guy came out, 500 people crammed into this bar. And there's a guy called Buddy Miller. He's a guitar player for Emmylou Harris. And I was chatting to him before the gig started, and he said to me, you need to check out this guy. This guy's about to come on here. He's incredible. So Pauling and I, we sat on the edge of the stage, literally with our backsides on the stage, looking over our shoulders at the artist. And he came out and he played a gospel tune. And he came out and he played another gospel tune and another gospel tune. And he had 3 black backing singers. He had a horn section. It was Otis Redding, James Brown, meets Kevin Prosh, meets Mavis Staples. It was Goosebumps, and it was the gospel getting blasted at 100 decibels. And we're sitting there. And I turned to the person beside me and I said, I need to get right with God. Because I drifted out of anger, out of hurt. I drifted. And that music called me to repentance. Mm-hmm. And that's the power of what you carry. That's the power of the gospel. And it never ceases. Look at Justin Bieber. Look at Kanye West. Look at what God's doing. It's such an exciting time that we're seeing that the gospel is so powerful that it's transforming the lives of multi-millionaires and rock stars and movie stars. And Aslan's on the move, bro, and he's not, the gates of hell won't prevail against it. And that's part of the thing you belong to. And I think we should. It's very hard. I do understand. I hear the stories of the big money. I see the fame and the recognition of worship artists and preachers, my favorite preachers and stuff. See them get thousands of likes on Instagram and stuff. And then I look at John Mayer, and he puts up a video of him making toast, and it gets 60,000 likes. and then you see Justin Bieber put up him and his wife playing chess, and it gets 250,000 likes. And you see that the Lord's not one at a time in here. He's mass communicating. You know that line out of Oh Brother Where Art Thou? We're not one at a time in here. We're mass communicating. That's Daniel's flower now. And that's God's touching these famous people, because those famous people are touching hearts. I shared a video on Facebook the other week of Justin Bieber singing at Kanye's event, and the Holy Spirit is all over it. It's not fake news. It's the real thing. He has really met the Papa. He's really met the Father. And I had me crying.
Yeah.
Because it's a beautiful thing. And your friend, did you say Gary Ward?
Graham Ward.
Graham Ward. You see, there's posters up in the halls of heaven to people like that.
Yeah.
There's posters up. There's God bragging, saying, "Look, here's my Hall of Fame." See all these people who Brian Houston can't remember their name. I remember their name. Look at that. Look at the size of that poster of Graham Ward. Look at the size of that poster of Kevin Prosh. See, everything that Kevin got wrong, God doesn't see. He just goes, "Look at my kid. Look what he did." He's still celebrating what Kevin did, and that was one guy in Belfast. How much more did he impact the world? Like, he's singing lyrics 20 years ago saying, "You love the Presbyterians, you love the gays and the lesbians." Like, that's radical now. And he was doing it 20 years ago.
Yeah. Especially the Presbyterians.
Well, I didn't want to say that.
I'm going to read out Graham's comment. He says, "I love what you guys are talking about. One morning I was sitting on the deck out front of our house playing my guitar, and the guy across the street came to the edge of his property to listen to me playing the slide guitar. I asked him to come over. I noticed he had a dark drink and assumed it was coffee, but he told me it was rum and coke first thing in the morning. Wow. I asked if I could sing a song for him, and I began to prophesy about his life and the hope he had in Christ." Yeah, man. That's it, isn't it? And I think, like, just a couple of thoughts. One was this, I actually heard this phrase today, true holiness walks towards the broken. Like, it's not the new wineskins that Jesus talked about. It's like, it's not this, like, we withdraw to our sacred places. It's true holiness takes the power and the presence and the love, compassion of God to those who are far from, they're the last and the last people you would think. And that's, Jesus, when he was touched by that woman, she was unclean, she touched the hem of his garment. She was too ashamed, to even, like, speak to him, just push through and try and just touch. And there's people like that, and they don't, and he had time for her, and it says he saw her, and then he called her daughter. And it's nailing me just talking about it.
Yeah.
It's like the new wineskin isn't religion, it's family, and it's like seeing, the one and the two, and that's the power in what Kevin did for you, isn't it? It's like, there's this guy, he's turned up with a guitar, and no one invited him. Like, we got a couple of options here, guys. we can kick him out, and he'll never, you know what I mean? Or we can say, hang on a minute, this guy's hungry for something, like, he's pushed through, he's Elisha, like, he won't stop, he's after something here. And whether it was like he heard God or just something in it, just a good guy. And but I think it's like, that's so important, and like, it's so easy to get away from that in music, and when there's success. And we had Robbie Dawkins on here a few weeks ago, and he was talking about Brian Welsh, who's another one who is just radical, on fire for God, but talked about him spending 40 minutes on the day of a show, missing his sound check, because he was trying to find a Bible for this girl that they'd met in the coffee bar, you know. And he's about to play for however many thousand people. And it's like, yeah, God does mass communicate. He certainly does. You know, the heavens declare the glory of God, and all that. He's broadcasting. But also, he really does care about one person. You know, he cares that, yeah, and that's something as people who follow him and are musicians, we've got to be looking out for the sound guy and the person who's just needs that conversation, doesn't know who you are, doesn't know, you know, what you've done and who, do you know what I mean? All that sort of stuff that we get caught up in. Like you say, how many likes, how many people are watching me.
Mate, I've made all those mistakes. Like, I've made all the mistakes of pride. And, you know, I used to have my rider, and I had my dressing room rider and my technical rider, and I wanted a bottle of wine, and I wanted Chinese food, and I wanted all these things. And, you know, I remember being embarrassed once because a manager that I had, we did an event, and the manager specified a whole bunch of Nintendo 64 games. That shows you how long ago it was. For us to play in the dressing room. I didn't even play Nintendo, but he thought this was funny to specify all these things. And we got to the dressing room, and all that stuff was there. And I said to the guy that was running everything, I said, wow, I didn't expect you guys to get all this stuff. And he said, well, it was on your rider, and we didn't want to, you know, disrespect you. I said, where did it all come from? He said, I took it from my kids. I was like, this is awful. These kids are spending a Saturday night because these idiots put this on their rider as a joke. And I dude, like, here's what I've discovered. Like, I went to, I did the Big Smile record, and it was put before EMI, and they said, we won't release this. And, you know, I had this prophetic word from Gerald Coates that I would be the voice of refreshing to hundreds of thousands of people in America. And suddenly I got all these checks from record labels because everybody thought I was going to be massive. And that record came out, and it went, and that was 2000. I think it was 2000, year 2000. And in 2011, this guy came up to me at a gig, tiny wee gig in Canada, handed me $500 check, and he said, if you come back next year, would you come to my church? We love your music. And I was like, sure. It's in a place called Espanola, which is 5.5 hours north of Toronto. And these people drove 5.5 hours down, picked me up the next year, and drove me up to their place. And I walked into this place. I think I did a songwriting seminar on the Saturday morning. I did a gig on the Friday night, I think, for them. And I led worship Sunday morning. And I walked in Sunday morning, and I said, what songs do you guys want to do? And they said, I'll play any one of your songs. We know them all. And I was like, what? Hi? And they said, I said, years ago, said back around 2001, said a group came up here from Stratford, Ontario, and they brought your CD, Big Smile. And he said, we liked it so much, we copied it and gave a copy to everybody in our congregation. they bootlegged the CD 150 times. And I was like, what? And there they were, this tiny little church of about 100 people in the middle of nowhere in a town of 5,000 beside a paper mill. They had been playing my songs for 11 years. And I just stood and I cried because the industry told me that record is worthless. But those guys had proven that the music on it, or whatever God was doing on it, was actually priceless. And those people have become some of my best friends in the world. Like the kindest, most generous, loving, beautiful people. And you see, my trajectory has not been tour bus, city, city, city. My trajectory has been borrowed car, tiny time, sleeping wherever someone lets me sleep, And I blame Godfrey Birtle. Godfrey Birtle's to blame for this because in 2003, I bumped into Godfrey and he told me his story of why he was doing what he was doing. And at that stage, I was staying in 4- and 5-star hotels. The label were paying for everything, the taxi, the meals. I was getting huge honorariums, bathrobes in the hotel rooms, buffet breakfasts. And I bump into Godfrey and he tells me that he's sleeping on airport floors and he's going to the lost and he's going to the broken and he's going to the low places. And I felt so guilty. And I thought, this man has a call and I'm just taking a check because it's offered to me. And it was the beginning for me of a journey to realize the thing that you've realized, the thing that Graham Ward's realized, that the community of singing from your porch to your neighbor with his rum and coke and then prophesying over him, the one-to-one, the give up the rider, give up the fame, give up the recognition, give up the big money, just serve him. And if he wants to exalt you, and don't get me wrong, like I'm human like everybody else, I would love it, you know. I remember having a conversation with a guy with a big label in America, and he said to me, what do you want to do? What do you dream of? And I said, I dream of having the big song. And he literally got up and left the room. It's an instant judgment and out the door. Wrong answer. And but I want that.
Even having a middle song.
Maybe if I'd have said, I want to see thousands of people worship Jesus, you know, if I'd have given the right answer. But I said, I was thinking, I've been a musician since I was 25. And if I don't get the big song with my interest-only mortgage, I've no idea how I'm going to pay it. Maybe if I'd have said that, he might have understood.
Still the wrong answer.
Yeah, it's the wrong answer. But the thing is, God will provide. The mortgage will get taken care of. Let's not worry about that. He's always provided. But the thing is that I have found that low path makes opportunities. I did this gig in a tiny little town in Canada called Lively, which wasn't particularly lively. And I did it in a church. And I met this young worship team on the Thursday, and I rehearsed with them. When I say young, we're talking 13, 14 here. And I met these 2 wee girls, and I started talking to them about what Kevin taught me about the Song of the Lord. And they looked at me with these wide eyes as if I was nuts. and I began to teach them how to sing the Song of the Lord and what it was to prophesy through music. And when we left Thursday night, I think they thought I was completely mad. We showed up Saturday to do the gig, 4:00. There was no water. There was no meal. There was no cup. Nothing. It was zero. And we rehearsed again and we played at 7:00. And by 9:00, those 2 wee girls were prophesying, making up spontaneous songs, singing the Song of the Lord. You don't get to do that when it's Goodnight Cleveland. You only get to do that when it's borrowed car, sleeping on somebody's bed, you know, borrowed bed, sofa. You get to do that, and you've got to ask yourself. Like, I played this place called North Bay, and I arrived, and the backing singers were a mother, her 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And I've seen the time when me, Big Ego Brian, would have went, are you kidding me? You don't know yet. You know, one of these things. But I've been humbled. What?
I'm kind of a big deal.
Yeah. In my head. But I've been humbled many times and got it wrong many times and had to eat humble pie many times. And I've had to grovel, I've had to beg, I've had to apologize, I've had to send letters to people for all the mistakes I made. Believe you me, I've done that, and I knew not to kick against what was happening. I knew God was going to do something. And we started to do a song in the middle of that thing, and we kind of quote Kevin in the middle of it, where it goes, "Lord of the dance, he's a dancing Lord." We get to the end, everybody dance now. And the 6-year-old and the 9-year-old, because all the kids in the church were all running around with flags going crazy. And as soon as we got to that point, that 6-year-old and that 9-year-old charged into the crowd and started running around with flags going wild and crazy. And I thought, if only you could get 2 adult backing singers to do that, to be so overcome with enthusiasm and worship that they charge into the crowd and go mental. Here I get to see that. Man, the stories I could tell you about kids who learned the shofar in their bedroom and came out when the Holy Spirit told them to and blew the shofar and the whole place got slid in the Spirit. Dude, you only get to see that when you play these places of like 50, 60, 70 people. I've never seen that in a concert hall. All I've ever seen is the ego and the money and the emptiness and the loneliness and the brokenness and the jealousy and the insecurity and the thing Kevin sung about in the Please Don't Leave song. That's what that world offers. And there's people listening to this right now and they're thinking, I'm too fat, I'm too thin, I'm too tall, I'm too short, I'm too old, I'm the wrong sex, I'm too young, I'm too ugly. They're thinking all these things, these disqualifiers. It's all right for you, it's all right for you, you've got this, you've got that, all that victim language. Let me tell you something. Your height, your weight, your face, your age, your location, and your gift will all stop you from getting a record deal. They cannot stop you from ministering. There's no sell-by date on ministering. You can do that till the day you die. There's an open door for you to go and minister and to bless and to serve. And you can do that. There's a guy called David Haddon, goes anywhere in the world. Legend of a man. People like that who just go out to these small places and they just serve wherever God's called them to. And there's a hall of fame in heaven where there's big pictures of these guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
hey man, we're like we've gone over. Usually these are just an hour, but
my fault.
No. I mean, I could just chat for ages and hear more stories, but probably at some point we need to go and have dinner or something. Is there anything you would want to? I mean, that is just awesome, and I love that. And I think somebody's value isn't dependent on how many people know about them, or even the song you've written, the album that you've made that no one's heard. That you. I know so many amazing musicians who aren't, and they're as good, if not better. They can sing. One of our worship leaders, she was a professional singer, and she just had enough of it. She just wants to worship, and wants to serve the church, and never wants any money for it. She's just, and she's so gifted. I know lots of those kind of people, and I mean, some of the musicians on the gospel scene, what they can do musically and the way their brains work harmonically and all that kind of stuff is just wild, and it's on some kind of level that I'm not on, and that's fine. But they're not. They should be known. If it was a fairness kind of thing, you'd think, you should be rich, or you should be this. But we're not in that. We're not in that game anyway. And I think it's definitely sometimes a merciful thing when things get stripped away, because you are left with, okay, well, why am I really doing this? And it's that sort of refining I think even, you know, with our band, we kind of sort of pretty much ran out of steam a few years ago, and then got together and played, feeling a little bit too old to be doing that. And, you know, I remember being told I was too old when I was 27. You know, like they said, "Oh, how old are you?" This is record companies. "How old are you?" "I'm 27." "You're 22." "No, I'm 27." "You're 22." It's just like, why does that matter? You know, it doesn't. And
It matters when it's a business. It matters when it's a music business.
yeah, but you can do things now that you couldn't do when you're younger, and like the ability to enjoy what you do increases, I think, as you get older. Like I love playing the guitar. I love singing. I love leading worship in church, and I love doing gigs with the band, and, you know, all that sort of stuff. I enjoy it, and I don't feel pressure, and I feel God's presence, you know. And I think that's, you know, to be content in Him is the main thing, isn't it? The rest will just peace. You know, peace with God is incredible.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, that it's actually, you know, we started off this conversation talking about how we became Christians, and, you know, you became a Christian because you needed Jesus, and we still need Jesus, and we still need Jesus. And, you know, if music's not enough for us with Jesus, there'll never be anything enough for us. Because, you know, the presence of God, when it comes, dude, there's nothing like it. And, you know, that song, The Blessing, the UK version, like when that came out there a few weeks ago, like my honest feelings were, oh, I wonder why they didn't ask me.
Yeah.
That's my first thought. And then I thought, then I started to think about all the bridges I burned with record labels and all the people I hurt. And I thought, yeah, well, that's probably why. And then I thought, well, it's probably because I'm not part of a big church. You know, I went through like a whole list of things. But see, when I listened to that thing, and I thought about 5 or 6 friends I know who have a million more reasons to be upset that their names aren't on that, far more than me. And I listened to that track, and I realized that those thoughts were the enemy's way of robbing me of what the song was actually saying. You know, may his favor be upon you for 1,000 generations, and your family and your children and their children and their children. May his presence go before you, behind you, beside you. The blessing in that song. Thank you, God, for the people who wrote that.
Yeah.
Thank you, God, for the people who poured their hearts into that. Because that blessed me, and I received the blessing. And I'm glad I didn't have to sing on that, because I had so much better listening to it and going, you know, this is amazing. I receive it, you know.
Could have done with a guitar solo, really, but, you know.
What?
Could have done with a guitar solo. Come on.
A lap steel. Yeah, but, you know.
Yeah.
So good, man.
There's enough space for everybody. You know, that's the lie, isn't there? That there's not space for your gift, and you're not needed because this guy's got this and this guy's got that. That means that there's less for me, and that's just not true. It's not true that, you know, there's a place for you. There's a way. You know, there's. You know, we stepped out for the NHS thing. No, the VE day, singing the Vera Lynn. I was like, I better learn that song. And one of my neighbours said, "Oh, why don't you bring your guitar?" And they don't know. You know, they know I work for the church. I'm this guy they see around playing football with my kids, and, you know, it's sort of started to come out through this thing because of a few things that happened online. So one of the neighbours said, "Oh, are you Mark James? You play guitar?" You know. So they kind of know I'm a musician. And then I went out and played the Vera Lynn song, you know, which I've never tried.
Yeah, it's hard.
We'll meet again. Don't know where. And then I thought, if the moment's right, I'm going to play Stand By Me.
Mm.
I'm going to do that. And then if the moment's right, I'm going to play Stand By Me. And it was one of those moments. And one of my neighbors shouted across, play one that we know. So I said, how about Stand By Me? And they all kind of went, oh, yeah, okay. And mate, it was such a worshipful moment. And I knew I was like, I was where I was supposed to be, doing what I was supposed to be doing. And, you know, it blessed them. Do you know what I mean? And it blessed me. And I felt, and I know that I know I was leading worship. I know I was leading worship for my street. You know, when the night has come, and the land is dark, and the moon is the only light you'll see, you know, I won't be afraid, just as long as you stand by me. And it was just us kind of going, we're all, you know, we're all scared, you know, we're all a bit scared.
That's leading worship right there. That's it.
Yeah.
It's being Levite.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, you had to hone the skills over years to stand in a street without a PA and bless your neighbors. Like that just says it all right there.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing, and what a privilege, eh? And I love, you know, like every musician I think is aware that what they have is a gift. You know, guitar playing came so easily to me. It's just ridiculous, you know. It was ridiculous. I was playing, once I got it, you know, once I got that blues scale, I was playing blues straight away. Like you didn't have to tell me how to do it. Just like I was away. And yeah, singing has been a bit more of a journey. It's taken years and years and years and I'm still learning massively. I'm still learning guitar as well, and there's so much you could learn, isn't there, in music? But yeah, we should probably end, mate. It's been epic. It's epic to know you, and I love the heart that you have, and yeah, I love that sort of. I love your vulnerability, the fact that you don't mind talking about your mistakes and your weaknesses, because that's so important for the rest of us, because we all got those insecurities and those things. And my heart with this is that people get a sort of a deeper look into people's lives and can see, you know, there is a true gold that God kind of has refined in people. And I know that to a large extent, you know, people like Kevin Prosh and Graham Ward and Martin Smith, and probably me and you for others, it's like people can come in and stand on your shoulders and go on, take it further, you know, take it, my heart, and also a great value, you know. So a good reminder to keep doing that for people, you know, keep opening those doors where we can and pushing.
You need to keep doing that youth work that you're doing, dude. You're sowing into people's lives. It's amazing. Well done.
It's fun. I'm getting very good at table tennis as well.
You're doing a good thing. Proud of you.
Thanks, dude. Well, we'll end this. We'll end this thing. Do check out Brian's music, because he's amazing, and there's loads of. What's the best album for people to start with you?
13 Days in August is a good one. It's on the website, brianhouston.com.
And also, you do online busking, don't you? You're the online busker.
That's me. I haven't done it for about 2 weeks because, to be honest, I was rehearsing to do worship for the church on Sunday. I was using a lot of new technology, so I was rehearsing for that. But I'll start up the online busking again, hopefully this week.
Right. We should say bye to some of these people. Trey and Tori are both on now.
Wow.
Amazing. And also Matthew Burt says, if it helps, Graham Ward, I've heard of him, but I don't know who this Brian guy is.
Well, we don't like you.
Dave Gillette is on here as well. He's another guy who's out in the pubs and restaurants and also Rocky on a Sunday. Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Maybe you can have a look through some of these comments later, Brian, on Facebook, and
Okay.
enjoy.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it. Thank you.